Hello, and welcome to the weekly sermon podcast with Reverend Marie Duquette. You can find the full live version service on YouTube's Be Ye Lifted.
The Gospel according to Luke, the 19th chapter. Now Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. There was a person named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and was rich. Zacchaeus was seeking to see who Jesus was, but was not able to on account of the crowd, being short in stature. So Zacchaeus ran ahead and climbed a sycamore to see Jesus, who was going to pass that way. Now when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house tonight." So Zacchaeus hurried down and welcomed Jesus, rejoicing. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "To a sinner has he gone to be a guest?" Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Messiah, "Look, half of my possessions, Anointed One, to the poor I will give, and if I have defrauded anyone, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to Zacchaeus, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a child of Abraham. For the Son of Woman came to seek out and to save the lost." The Gospel of the Lord. And that is the only time we hear of Zacchaeus in the entire Bible. There is a song about him that begins, "Zacchaeus was a wee little man." And I was glad that it was created now instead of when he was alive, because I don't think he would have liked it. I learned about it before I learned about Zacchaeus, because when I was working at a church as a first-year student, the choir would go outside and practice in the spring. And they stood on level ground, all 75 of them. And I was an alto in the middle, and I could never see the director. And so one day I climbed a tree right near the choir. I was so fed up with not being able to see. So I climbed this tree and was happily singing up there like a bird. And when the whole thing was over, like Zacchaeus, I went to scramble down the tree, and my foot missed the lowest limb, and I fell 10 feet on my face. And so you can imagine my dismay the next day at church when all the children started singing this Zacchaeus song led by the children's choir director to me. And I had no idea why. So Zacchaeus has kind of a soft spot in my heart, we both being tree climbers. Frederick Buechner died this past week. Frederick Buechner, he was 96 years old. Many people think that he was a pastor because so much of his writing had a religious slant to it, but he actually never had a congregation that he led. He was a Presbyterian minister who found his calling writing on prodigious quantity of novels, memoirs, and essays that explored the human condition. His writing is often inspirational, humorous from religious perspectives, and he often would contemplate on the page the things that if you're leading a congregation, you often think but would be best not to say. He questioned some of the practices in the church, and he questioned the extent to which people would find fault with the other without being able to find fault in themselves. When he was 12 years old, I believe, his father committed suicide. And so some of his writing is extremely provocative, and it deals with the depths of grief in a situation like that. And one of the things he writes about a lot is that they never spoke about it again. After his father committed suicide, his mother and his family never spoke about it again. And we know now today that that's not healthy for anyone, and we continue the practice today. Those of us who have had suicide in our family, we rarely talk about that. And so I think at the occasion of his death, perhaps this is an opportunity for those who would like to talk about it to do so. And I invite you to let me know if you would like me to listen. One of the things that Wilda Gaffney noted about Zacchaeus is that he was extremely wealthy, and that all we know is that Jesus called him out of that tree. He scampered down and immediately made commitments to make right on what he had done to harm other people, particularly financially. But then it says he's going to stay, Jesus says, I'm going to stay at your house tonight. And there is nothing in the reading, nothing in the Bible that tells us what happened at his house, and I want to know. I mean, think about that. Jesus calls you out of a tree and says, come down, I'm going to stay at your house tonight. I'm not going to just come over and sit on the swing on your porch. I'm going to stay at your house tonight. Now, Zacchaeus was rich. Maybe he had servants. Maybe it was all cleaned up. Maybe his pantry was full. I don't know. I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like for me if Jesus found me in a tree and said, come, I'm going to stay at your house tonight. And I would be thinking immediately in my mind, let's see. I think there's some chips on top of the fridge, but they might just be crumbs, right? I know that we've got some apples that we just got from the fruit market. I wonder how far I could make those go. Surely Jesus won't want a big dinner. I wonder if we have any dates. I hear he likes dates. Nuts. He likes nuts. I could put nuts inside. That's where I would be. I don't think that I would scamper down the tree and immediately begin to repent when he said he was staying at our house, right? So I'm just imagining, what did he say once he was at Zacchaeus' house? Dude, nobody likes you. You're okay with that, right? How did you get all your money? Why did you decide that you were going to publicly make these promises immediately when you came out of the tree? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you did, but it seems like an interesting. Why were you up in the tree? So, who do you hang out with? No one. How lonely. Do you need any help around here? I'm pretty good with wood and my hands. What would they have talked about over dinner? We don't know. We do know something about the tree, though. The sycamore tree appears several times in the New Testament. But the main interpretation of what it stands for comes from this very story. Zacchaeus is this wealthy tax collector in Jericho. The sycamore tree for Catholics is a symbol of a place in their own lives where they have been able to have a clear vision of the Savior. Moments when things become crystal clear and you realize what you are intended to do in a situation. Maybe you're meant to turn and go a different way. Maybe you're meant to see someone in a new light. Maybe you're meant to offer grace even if the other person has never even apologized. Maybe you're meant to show up here on Sunday morning not really knowing what you will get out of it, but imagining that God has something to say to you or through you to someone else, and so out of faith you come. So for Catholics, and I would say for many Protestants, the sycamore tree is a symbol of places in their lives where they can more clearly see Jesus. In Judaism, the sycamore is in the same family as the common fig tree, and figs are one of the 7 native species of Israel. Sycamore trees in Judaism are thought of as givers of fruit and wood. They were trees that provided the people who lived near them with a livelihood of using them to build things or to eat the fruit. And interestingly, in Egyptian texts, sycamore trees are associated, they're mentioned in the Book of the Dead, and they were used to make coffins. They could be shaped easily, and they made both plain and ornate coffins out of them. So you could look at this reading, and you could say, I'm supposed to look for places in my life where I see Jesus clearly. Maybe I'm supposed to separate myself from the crowd as Zacchaeus did in the tree and try to get an overview of what's going on. Maybe I'm supposed to rest in various crafts that I haven't done in a long time that I am intended, that I was gifted to do, things that bring me a sense of peace. It's hard to know by looking at the tree what this story is about. We don't know what was said at the table when he stayed the night, so it's hard to look at that. But Frederick Buechner wrote about Zacchaeus in his book, Peculiar Treasures. It is an A to Z anthology in which he takes biblical characters, every single one he deems peculiar, and he writes about them based on his extensive biblical study, even though he did not lead a congregation. And in honor of Frederick Buechner's life and death, and the influence he has had on my own writing and preaching, I'm going to close with what he has to say about this. Zacchaeus stood barely 5 feet tall with his shoes off, and was the least popular man in Jericho. He was head tax collector for Rome in the district and had made such a killing out of it that he was the richest man in town as well as the shortest. When word got around that Jesus would soon be passing through, he shinnied up into a sycamore tree so he could see something more than just the backs of other people's heads. And that's where he was when Jesus spotted him. "Zacchaeus," Jesus said, "get down out of there in a hurry. I'm spending tonight with you." Whereupon all Jericho snickered up their sleeves to think he didn't have better sense than to invite himself to the house of a man that nobody else would touch with a 10-foot pole. But Jesus knew what he was doing. Zacchaeus was taken so completely aback by the honor of the thing that before he had a chance to change his mind, he promised not only to turn over 50% of his holdings to the poor, but to pay back 4-to-1 all the cash he'd extorted from everybody else. Jesus was absolutely delighted. "Today, salvation has come to this house," he said. And since that was his specialty after all, you assume he was right. Zacchaeus makes a good one to end with because, in a way, he can stand for all the rest. He's a sawed-off little social disaster with a big bank account and a crooked job, but Jesus welcomes him aboard anyway, and that's why he reminds you of all the others too. There's Aaron whooping it up with the golden calf the moment his brother's back is turned. And there's Jacob conning everybody, including his own father. There's Jael driving a tent peg through the head of an overnight guest. And Rahab, the first of the red-hot mamas. There's Nebuchadnezzar with his taste for roasting the opposition. And Paul holding the lynch mob's coats as they go to work on Stephen. There's Saul the paranoid, and David the stud, and those mealy-mouthed friends of Job's who would probably have succeeded in boring him to death if Yahweh hadn't stepped in just in the nick of time. And then there are the ones who betrayed the people who loved them best, such as Absalom and poor old Peter and Judas. Like Zacchaeus, they're all of them peculiar as hell, to put it quite literally. And yet you can't help feeling that, like Zacchaeus, they're all of them somehow treasured too. Why are they treasured? Who knows? But maybe you can say at least this about it, that they're treasured less for who they are and for what the world has made them than for what they have it in them at their best to be. Because ultimately, of course, it's not the world that made them at all. All the earth is mine, says Yahweh, and all that dwells therein, adds the 24th Psalm. And in the long run, presumably that goes for you and me too.
You just heard from Reverend Marie Duquette, pastor at King of Kings in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You can help support this ministry by texting your contribution to 833-950-1405. That's the U.S. 833-950-1405. You can find the full service video on YouTube Live at Be Lifted. Drop us a comment or join us on live chat at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Sunday mornings.